ways, it's not really a 400 years of nothing happening. Lots of stuff happens that sets the stage for Jesus. So that's what we've been talking about for 2 weeks now. We're going to continue talking about today. But we kind of left off last week talking about Hellenism, and we compared Hellenism, which is the Greek worldview that Alexander the Great and then his generals spread around the world, the known world at the time, and how that relates to what we believe today. We talked about that Hellenism teaches that man is the ultimate in reality, and that man is the center of everything, that the mind is the basis of truth, the body is the ultimate in wisdom, and that pleasure is the ultimate goal in life. And then we said, wow, that sounds an awful lot like what people believe today and what people teach today. We talked about that it spread, that it wasn't a passive thing, that the Greeks, starting with Alexander, but they had a plan to spread their worldview. The idea was, if all these conquered people, if they think and look and act and interact as we do, it's going to be easier to control. So they had a systematic plan of spreading their worldview and spreading Hellenism, and we said the way they did that was through the theater, art, and media, through the gymnasium, through sports, through the temple and religion, and through education. And we then took a pause and went, wow, that sounds an awful lot like some agendas today, and how the current Hellenized worldview is spread in a very similar way. And so that's what Jesus has to deal with. We looked at a city, Jerash, and I showed you examples of all of those things. The theater, the gymnasium, the arena, sports arena, and the temple, and how important that was, and how they were trying to say, wow, look at us. So today, we're not going to get bogged down in the 5 generals and what happened to each one. We're really just going to be concerned with 2 of the generals that takes over, because Alexander didn't have an heir. You know, he died very young. He took over very young, and he died very young. And so his kingdom was split between his top 5 generals. And so we're going to be looking at, what color is that? Orangey color and the purple color. And some of you going, well, what about the green? The green guy very quickly is pushed out of the Holy Land, and the fight really comes between Mr. Purple and Mr. Orange. So we're going to be looking at them today, and then how that then creates the Sadducees, the Pharisees, the Zealots, and the Essenes all come out of this scenario that's being played out here. So anyway, if you will click, oh, do you need it?
No, I got it.
Sponge it myself. All right, so, and I may, not be pronouncing these names exactly correct, but hopefully I'm getting them pretty close. Does anybody need, before I get started, if you weren't here last week or maybe didn't bring it, I have an outline that you could take notes on with the periods in there. The 4 periods, the Persian periods, what we've been talking about for a couple of weeks. We're now on the Greek periods, and then hopefully today, if I'll get around to it, we'll be talking about the Maccabean period, and then next week, the Roman period. So everybody else is good? All right, awesome. So, Ptolemy is one of the generals. That's a statue of him. Who knows if that's exactly what it looked like, but it's our best guess because it's an ancient statue and they probably knew what they were doing. So Ptolemy gains control of what is today Israel and Egypt. He was the bottom one. And then, go ahead. Of lesser importance. And then Seleucus, I guess is maybe how you would say that, gains control of Syria and Persia, the big orange part. And again, these names are not that important for you to remember, certainly, but I want to let you see them and talk about, at least be able to talk about them as we go. Okay, so title here, the Hellenistic period, still in the Greek period. Now you just have, instead of Alexander, you have his 2 generals. Now we're only talking about the Holy Land. So when I say Hellenistic period, the Ptolemaic period, this is the general that's in charge of the Holy Land, and his descendants, his sons, ruling from 320 to 198. So we call that their last name period of time. What did they do? And again, I'm not going to bore you with a whole bunch of details on that, but there's some pretty important issues that you need to know about. First is they were pretty lenient toward the Jews. Policy toward Jews was influenced by tolerance. They're going to tolerate Jews, allow Jews to practice their religion, basically leave them alone, but present them with Hellenism, present them with these cities that they've built, and let that be the call. Not actively go out and say, Jews, you must convert, but just give them the alternative. So they left them alone. And this started back with Alexander. And we talked about that last week's story of Alexander and how, as the story goes, that he had a dream and then he recognized the person from the dream when he went to Jerusalem, and he spared Jerusalem, and he was very lenient on the Jews. Whereas other areas of the world he conquered, he clamped down and instituted Hellenism in a more forceful way. So evidently his general kind of kept that same policy, kind of leave the Jews alone as far as any kind of force or anything like that. Also, this is the time when the city of Alexandria is created in Egypt, obviously named for Alexander. Very important city in ancient history, big library which unfortunately was destroyed and we lost. I mean, we'd be a whole lot smarter today if that library hadn't been destroyed later on in history. But very important city, and the Ptolemaics moved many Jews from the Holy Land to Alexandria, and you had a large Jewish population in Egypt, in particular in the city of Alexandria. And it was kind of the center of learning. What would be, like in the United States, this may be a bad question, what would be kind of what would y'all say would be the center of learning in the United States?
Harvard.
Maybe Harvard, fortunately, or Yale, or someplace, I don't know. Maybe the Smithsonian's or something, I don't know. But in the Greek world, outside of Greece, the center of learning and knowledge was Alexandria. So a very important place. So one of his sons, Ptolemy II, I really want to talk about this for a second because it's interesting. The Septuagint. Most of you at least heard the name. You might not know what in the world it was, but you've probably heard the name Septuagint. Is created by Ptolemy II, a pagan emperor of this part of the world. Decides he wants a Greek translation of the Hebrew Old Testament. And that's all that's around is the Old Testament. And so he commissions a bunch of the Jews, not a bunch, but 70 Jews, Jewish scholars there in Alexandria to translate the Greek Old Testament, the Old Testament, Hebrew Old Testament, into Greek. And we still have that today. It's very important work today. But he wanted it for the library. I mean, he wasn't converting. He does not convert to Judaism to worship the one true God. He's still the worshiping the many gods. But you can see how important Alexandria was for their learning and stuff, where the emperor says, hey, let's get a Greek copy of what the Hebrews believe and place it in the library there at Alexandria. And there's, anybody know Greek?
Looks like Genesis, maybe.
Yeah. We'll get Brother Greg in here and he'd say, in the Greek, that means...
I bet it says, in the beginning, God created the
I bet it
heavens.
does. Go. Now, the Septuagint means 70 for the number of translators. Now, I did read one word said there were 72 translators, and not a big deal. We don't get bogged down in details.
Rounding.
But rounding. But it's called the Septuagint because of the 70 Jewish scholars, priests that translated it. As I said, it's a very important work. And I found this fascinating. The more you study even history, not just the Bible, but especially the Bible, but the more you study, just the more you go, oh, okay. Most of the New Testament, where they quote the Old Testament, they're quoting from the Septuagint. Because at the time of Jesus, the Septuagint is the widely circulated copy of the Old Testament. So obviously Jews are reading it in Hebrew, but a lot of people, because again, the early church and the disciples and Paul and everybody's communicating to everyone, so the Septuagint is kind of the standard copy of the Old Testament for the Greek-speaking world, including Palestine and the Holy Land. And so this explains sometimes when we read a quote in the New Testament and your footnote says it's quoting Psalms 100, and you go to Psalms 100 and it's not the exact same words. This explains, not every single instance of that, but this explains most of that is because the New Testament writers are quoting from the Septuagint, not the original Hebrew. Our copy of the Bible doesn't use the Septuagint to translate. They use original Hebrew, which is much better, by the way. I mean, our copy of the Bible is better because they have found other manuscripts since, and they use better manuscripts. Don't want to, again, get bogged down, sorry, in that. But that does explain why sometimes the wording may be a little off. And strong Christians are not going to go, oh my goodness, I'm going to doubt my faith because, Matthew quotes Genesis and it's not the exact same wording. But some new Christians or some people, I don't know, it could cause some problems. But just like everything else we've talked about for the past 2 years, there is an explanation. It's just most Christians don't know the explanation. so we are scared to defend our faith, or we shy away from those kind of things, but easily explainable. The New Testament almost always is quoting from the Septuagint, not an original Hebrew manuscript. A lot of people going, oh yeah, that's cool, so learn something good today. All right, any questions about the Septuagint? And again, think about what God did. God knew His Son was coming. God knew that there would need to be the Old Testament in wide circulation, where everybody could read, not just the Hebrews, because He's going to the Gentiles, and so He has a pagan king request of the Jews to translate it into Greek. I mean, that's just, I'm getting chill bumps just talking about it now. I mean, God is an awesome, amazing God, and He works everything out and according to His plan, and so all the times we don't see it, but wow, when Jesus hits the scene, it's there. It's already in circulation, ready to go. Go. Okay, it's a little hot, I'm sure. But anyway, still Greek period, Hellenistic period is Greeks. Now what happens is those two generals, everybody knows human nature, they're not satisfied with the borders of their kingdoms. And so the Egyptian guy is fighting the more northern Syrian guy, and that's the Seleucid period for the general, Seleucus, I think is how you say his name. Go ahead. For the Seleucid Empire, a name that should sound familiar, Antioch is the most prominent city for there, whereas Alexandria is the most prominent city for the Ptolemies or Ptolemy. For the Seleucids, it's Antioch. And Antioch, there's two Antiochs in the Bible, but this is one of the two. I mean, this is the same city. It's in Syria today. Go ahead. And then this is a very important event that occurs. Okay, because what was the policy of Ptolemy and his sons toward the Jews? We just got it a second ago. Tolerance. Okay. Now the other general and then his descendants, not so much. What are you smiling at?
I just thought you might need to smile. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Sorry. No smile. So Antiochus III is one of the Seleucid, one of his sons, defeats, and again, you don't even have to write down their names. It's not that important. The other general, and takes Jerusalem. And so now a different general's descendants controls the Holy Land. And things are about to change, not right away, as you can see. But pretty quickly things are going to start to change for the Jews. At first, the Jews welcomed the new leader, just kind of like they swapped from the Persians to the Greeks when the Jews and the Samaritans, we took that note 2 weeks ago, when they realized Alexander and his army's coming and Alexander is going to win, they immediately go, oh, we're not loyal to the Persians, we will join you, Alexander. And so when the new general, new emperor, they're not really using the word emperor yet for this, but when he comes along, the Jews welcome him. Say, hey, not a big deal, we'll just swap from the guy you defeated to you. And the first one confirms Jewish privileges, reduced the amount of taxes that the Jews were having to pay, and even made contributions to the temple. So everything's going good. Jews are like, okay, peaceful, well, not peaceful, there was a big battle, but not involving the Jews. So hey, we're okay. Now you do want to write his name down, and you do want to underline his name, if you care about history at all, not for the Bible. But this is a big, huge, in fact, it is. This guy, many people believe this guy is part of Daniel's prophecy being fulfilled. So Daniel is talking about Alexander, and then not everybody, but a lot of scholars believe Daniel also doesn't mention him by name. Obviously, Daniel's prophesying. But this is the guy Daniel's talking about. He's often referred to as the Antichrist of the Old Testament. I mean, he's that bad of a guy. And what he's about to do to the Jews. He takes over from his brother, and he's determined to spread Hellenism. None of this influenced by tolerance, but he decides he's going to forcefully spread Hellenism throughout all of the territory that he controls, which now includes what is today Israel. And just a reminder of what Hellenism is, the Greek worldview, where man is the center of everything. And so, He's the leader. He's got the military might. He decides to force the Jews at sword point to convert to Greeks, basically to be Hellenist. But you can still be an ethnic Jew, but religious Judaism, he's attempting to wipe it out. And again, if he had been successful, would that affect us today? You should all be going like this. Yeah, no Jesus. No New Testament. No nothing. So obviously he's not going to be successful, but he comes pretty close. Except for God's intervention, of course. We have all the stories in our Old Testament about God intervening and all of that, and saving the Israelites from the Philistines and all those things. And here's just, again, it's not recorded in Scripture, but in history, in that 400 years, we have God saving his people, again, in an amazing, miraculous way that I will walk you through over the next couple of minutes, perhaps. So his policy toward Jews was convert to Hellenism by force, and he was very brutal. Just look at him.
Looks mean.
He looks mean, yeah. He just looks mean. Again, that's an ancient sculptor. We don't know if he commissioned it or not, but that's him. Antiochus the Fourth. Evil, evil guy. Antichrist of the Old Testament, some people say. Again, just to set you up for how bad. So what did he do? Well, not first thing, but one of the things he does is he raises taxes on the Jews. He's, when the general goes off and fights a big war, it's expensive. So how do you pay for it? Even though you're the victor, you still got this big debt. And so throughout history, one of the ways to pay for it is raise taxes on everybody. So he raises taxes on the Jews tremendously, and that's some coins of Antiochus IV that they would have been minting and using, and the Jews would have to then pay their taxes. So economically, they're being oppressed. Just brutally oppressed. With a lot of people losing their family-owned plots of land and farms and that kind of stuff because they can't pay the taxes. And that's many times that's the goal. Tax them so much they can't pay, then you confiscate the land, and then you have to pay. So very brutal in the taxes, but that's like, go ahead, Mary. That's like nothing compared to what he's about to do. He steals stuff from the temple. Not the first time this has happened. We have a couple times recorded in Scripture where the Assyrians or the Babylonians plunder the temple, and then the stuff is put back at some point when the Babylonians allow the Israelites to return. But Antiochus again needs money and plunders the temple of all the gold and all the utensils and all that kind of stuff. Now, again, look at that. Stops temple worship. Orders scriptures burned. Outlaws all Jewish observances, and I just listed a few, just some of the biggies. But all religious Jewish practices are outlawed. Penalty is death. So no more circumcision. That's a commandment that they're supposed to do. So you can't circumcise your kid. If you do, you can be killed. You cannot worship on the Sabbath. If you do, you would be killed. You cannot read the scriptures. If you're caught reading scripture, you would be killed. We're not talking about thrown in jail or slap on the wrist. Kill you. So if you're a Jew, you're in a very tight spot. You're being tempted to convert to Hellenism anyway because it's so, what's the word I'm talking? It's so alluring. It's so like, wow, come over to our side. And so you have this big, huge temptation anyway. And then now if you do what you know to be right, you risk death for you and your family. So a lot of people do what? They say forget it. Now, not everybody, of course, thank goodness, but a lot of Jews simply say, I'll become Greek. I'm not going to risk my life for this, and this other way of living looks cool anyway. And again, think about what it would be like today. It would be like, the government coming in and shutting down Lakeside Baptist Church, saying step foot in here again next week, and we're going to have you all killed, and then confiscating all of our Bibles. And just burning them, and saying, you can't worship, you can't do anything related to Christendom. We're not to that point yet. Who knows in the future what God has in store for us? But the Jews have to deal with that. That is what they are. That is a reality for them. It gets worse. You're like, how can it get worse if you're a Jew? That's how it gets worse. After he steals from the temple, He goes into the temple, into the Holy of Holies. He erects a statue to Zeus. Probably a statue. We don't know exactly how he did it. But some kind of altar, a statue to Zeus. And sacrifices a pig on the altar to God. Now, again, this is the holy temple that he's then have taken over, converting it to the worship of Zeus, and then sacrifice a pig, which, if you've been under a rock, you might not remember, but pigs are unclean animals for the Jews, so that's like the very worst thing you can do. And then takes the blood and the guts and stuff of the pig and throws it and spreads it all around the temple. So not just polluting the altar, but takes the animal and desecrates the entire temple complex to the Jews, thinking, I've changed their temple to the worship of Zeus and I've desecrated it. It's illegal. They're just all going to do what I say, and everybody's going to convert to worshiping Zeus and all the other gods, and I got it, is what he obviously thinks. Now think about, again, hopefully we will never be in this position as Christians, but think about what a tough decision that would be for us. I mean, we're all right now sitting here going, under no persecution, oh yeah, well, we would stay focused. We would stay loyal to God. We would still worship God. That's pretty tough, seeing what all is happening and penalty of death and all of that stuff. So you got to do everything in secret and risk getting caught. And it's not like all the Jews can hang together. A bunch of your fellow Jews have gone over to the dark side, so to speak, and will turn you in and are Hellenistic and all of that stuff. So they're in a very, 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 very bad place in their history, all because of Antiochus IV. So you can see where he would get that nickname by some scholars, the Antichrist of the Old Testament. And again, Daniel speaks, okay, Daniel's prophecies, there's not a 100% consensus on what exactly Daniel's talking about. The most consensus is he's talking about the Greeks, he's talking about the Persians, he's talking about the Babylonians, the Persians, the Greeks, and then the Romans. I mean, that's the widely accepted. And then within that, a lot of people think Daniel is specifically talking about, in some of the prophecy, about this guy. Again, I just want to be fair to everyone. That would not be 100% accepted, but I just want to point out none of Daniel's prophecy is 100% accepted as far as the interpretation of who is exactly talking about. But most Christian scholars put it in that order, the four empires, with Alexander's Greek Empire, and then the Romans is the big one, and then the one to come coming in the future. Anyway, go. Just some example of what Greek soldiers looked like at the time. I mean, predecessors of the Romans, so very similar to what the Romans would look like, but that's a Greek soldier, well armed, best equipment. I mean, that would be the United States of today. I mean, that's why Alexander wins, even though in most of the battles Alexander is outnumbered by the Persians, by anybody else. They have better tactics, better armor, better steel. I mean, they got better everything. So their tactics and equipment defeat larger numbers. And then, of course, they have one of the greatest generals in the history of the universe, Alexander the Great. All right, so giving you a little insight into what's going on. By the time Antiochus comes in, or actually Antiochus kind of does this, the office of the high priest, the top religious leader in all of Judaism, in all of Jerusalem, in the temple, is no longer able to trace their ancestry back to Aaron. Antiochus does away with that, and the high priesthood is bought by Jews that have converted to Hellenism. The very first high priest that did this, I mean, we have the information, we have the history, not in the Bible, but we have the history of this, to show you what he did. His name was Joshua. He changed his name to Greek name. Many Jews did that, so Jason is his name. So the high priest, the first high priest that is placed on the throne by a Greek, his name is Jason, formerly Joshua. But he bought it. He paid for it, and then the Greeks make him high priest because, I mean, he's not a priest. It's a political position now. So basically what you have here, to summarize it, is the high priest now becomes a political appointee. Jason, by the way, is deposed by Menelaus, I think is his name. It doesn't matter. But he pays more money. He goes to Antiochus IV and says, hey, I got more money than Jason. Can I be high priest? And he says, sure. And so he also, this is a Jew, did this, also plunders, I guess, some of what was left in the temple, takes that and then converts it to currency and gives it to Antiochus to pay for him being high priest. And so the Jewish people are being oppressed, they're being taxed, their religion is under tremendous attack, and now their religious leaders are not concerned with religion, they're only concerned with politics and how do I stay in power. So again, you're like, well, oh my goodness, what do we do? Of course, we don't put our faith in man, do we? We don't put our faith in pastors, and I love Brother Greg, but we shouldn't put our faith in Brother Greg, we shouldn't put our faith in any staff person, we shouldn't put our faith in any Christians on TV or anything like that. We all make mistakes. Our faith should be in God. We shouldn't be, just devastated when someone in position of leadership in Christianity in the United States, when they make a mistake, or they say, oh my goodness, sometimes we get depressed. Make sure your faith is in God. Because if you were a Jew, it doesn't get any worse than that. You just got let down by the high priest. And so from now, relating it to the New Testament, so from this point forward, the high priest is no longer able to directly trace their ancestry to Aaron, as far as I know. There may be some exceptions later, but the high priest that Jesus is dealing with is coming out of this line now. I bought it. I'm powerful. My family is powerful. The high priestly families during the time of Jesus is very, very wealthy. In Jerusalem, very wealthy. So Caiaphas and what's the other one's name? Involved in the trial of Jesus, Caiaphas and Ananias.
Annas.
Yeah, they're very wealthy families coming from this high priesthood here.
So there's no Levites, maybe?
There are priests, like some of the Pharisees are actually priests, and then even a few of the Sadducees, I haven't taught you about them yet, but we're getting there eventually, I promise, are still Levites. But what you have is now a split, whereas prior to this note right here, every single priest was a Levite and traced their ancestry to Aaron. After Antiochus IV, that's not the case. Some still do, but not. When you read Jesus confronting a religious leader, a lot of them are really just Hellenized political appointee people. Not all of them, certainly. Obviously, many of them know their scripture and have a good conversation with Jesus, even if they're wrong. But need to understand that the high priesthood, the hierarchy of the temple, has changed now from good line to mediocre at best. Okay. The Hasmonean period, the next period of time, it's also called Maccabean because the Hasmonean is, think of it this way. Like my name is Stephen Hickman, right? So if I took over, it would be the Hickmanian, or the Hickman period, okay? But then if I had a nickname, a quite popular nickname, you might also call it the period of time for my nickname, right? So, family name, nickname. Because it gets confusing. And I'm sure I've even confused you guys over the past year or so when sometimes we've talked about it and I've said Hasmonean, Maccabean, or I've said the Maccabees and somebody says it's the Hasmonean. And Herod was he married anyway, getting confused. Last name, nickname is all you need to understand. Okay? This is so good. This is the Maccabean revolt. This is where a few people decide we're not going to do that. We're going to stand up for what God wants. And they should have got crushed. They should have got totally destroyed. But they don't. God is with them. And they're going to, next week, we're going to learn how they defeat the Greeks in a miraculous way. Just as miraculous as David and Goliath. And just as miraculous as Moses and holding up the staff, and Aaron and Hur holding him up, and they defeat the Amalekites. We're talking about if the Old Testament continued on instead of stopping with Malachi, this story would be in there. It's God moves in an amazing way, and they defeat the superpower of the day with just a ragtag bunch of guerrillas. And so we'll learn about the Maccabean revolt, how it relates to Hanukkah, the celebration of Hanukkah today. And I'm just going to quit saying this, even though I'm about to say it, because you guys are like, he's lying. He's never going to teach us about the Sadducees and the Pharisees. But if I were to I'm tempted just to prove it by having Mary hit enter a couple of times. But you're about to see the word Sadducee come up in just a few more bullets during that, because the Sadducees appear during the Hasmonean revolt, and then the Pharisees come a little bit later, but still during this time period. So, questions from today. I don't know. I gotta figure out how to speed up. Mary was joking, we're gonna be on this till Christmas. I'm like, what was it? I said 2 weeks, and now we're on 3. Today's 3. Next week will be definitely 4 and 5, because I thought I threw the Maccabean revolt after this. But anyway, I'm having a lot of fun. Y'all should see my office. I got like books open all around, and my desk. You know, y'all see my desk? It goes like this. I got like open book here, and I'm having a lot of fun. Hopefully, it's translating a little bit to you guys, learning about this stuff. All right, if there are no questions, then prayer request.